Hello, I'm Lady Smith, Chair of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. Today, I publish my 14th volume of findings. They're part of a series of published findings in relation to our overall boarding schools case study. The evidence uncovered in that case study has revealed aspects of the boarding provision for children at these schools, which involved dreadful abuse. It shows that boarders and day pupils were subjected to various forms of abuse, that both the boarding and day school environments were one where abusive practices were perpetrated by members of staff and pupils, and that they largely went unchecked. This volume relates to Merchiston Castle School, Edinburgh. In common with Loretto School, Morrison's Academy, Gordonston and Queen Victoria's School, I find that children who boarded at Merchiston were exposed to risks of sexual, physical and emotional abuse. And I find that for many children, those risks materialised. They were abused while in the care of Merchiston. From the 1950s to the second decade of the 21st century, there was a more or less continuous line of consistent indecency perpetrated by two prolific abusers, Mervyn Preston and James Rainey Brown. The former taught the latter, who then returned to Merchiston as a teacher, after which they worked together. They engaged in abusive behaviour which became normalised for generations of boys. In the cases of both those men, their long-standing service and positions of power in boarding houses rendered them virtually untouchable. In total, 8 teachers abused children sexually, 7 were male and 1 was female. Conduct included voyeurism, encouraging nudity, indecent exposure, indecent assaults, lewd and libidinous practices, and in the case of the female member of staff, it included encouraging senior pupils to engage in sexual intercourse with her. 2 teachers stand out as using corporal punishment sadistically, beating beyond accepted maxima and using extreme violence. One of them did so despite having pastoral responsibilities. The severe nature of his beatings was well known, but the school didn't stop him, nor did they discipline him. There was physical abuse of pupils by other pupils as well, principally as an aspect of bullying. It was a consistent problem, and bullying continues. A lack of school supervision over decades, particularly up to 1980, allowed a bullying culture, often combining violence and emotional abuse, to flourish amongst the boys. Pupils who were different in some respect, and so didn't fit the Merchiston mould, were vulnerable to being abused, and such children were often abused. The most obvious difference that rendered a child vulnerable was lack of sporting ability in a school which had a strong sporting tradition, particularly in rugby. Abuse could also arise because of social status, physical differences, or between those who had boarded at prep school and knew the boarding system already, and those who had not arrived at the school via that route. For decades, differences, particularly those that made children vulnerable, went unnoticed by the school and staff. A one-size-fits-all approach was not good enough. Not all children did fit, and that wasn't their fault. The Merchiston culture, where toughness in adversity was encouraged, facilitated and exacerbated abuse. Policies were introduced, including in relation to child protection in 1999, and power was devolved to lighten the burden on the headmaster. Despite improvements, shortcomings remained. Buoyed by and content to rely on positive, but in fact inadequate and insufficiently critical inspection reports that failed to identify inherent flaws, Merchiston thought itself a leader in the field. But all of that fell apart following the suicide of James Rainey Brown, after he'd been told he was subject to police investigation. A new inspection regime from 2014 and wider police inquiry revealed many long-standing weaknesses in child protection and pastoral care. Policies and their implementation had been unsatisfactory. HR processes had been consistently poor and leadership weak, although well-intended. Concerning behaviour had been recorded, but obvious abusive trends or potential trends were repeatedly missed. References were badly handled and child protection concerns ignored. Abusers and potential abusers were sometimes protected by tradition, long service, or governor loyalty. Following a negative inspection report, Merchiston was made subject to special measures by the Scottish Government. Merchiston responded to that report and the imposition of special measures, as it had to do, and was well led in that by its Board of Governors. Policies were corrected and became meaningful. The school learned that an appetite for continual improvement is necessary. Recent leaders have reflected and provided helpful insights into possible improvements within the oversight and regulation of the boarding school sector. Merchiston offered a genuine apology for the abuse experienced by children entrusted into their care. Applicants and other witnesses continue to come forward to the inquiry with relevant evidence about boarding schools, and this will be considered as part of a continuing process. I would encourage anyone who has relevant information on any aspect of our work to get in touch with our witness support team. We want to hear from you.